Holt. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the honourable member for Riverina.
Well, the Shadow Minister for Early Childhood Education and Youth certainly summed it up when she talked about the failures of Labor on this particular issue. And indeed, education is so important. It is the great enabler, particularly for our young people, and Labor has let them down on their watch. At the moment, we have got record HECS debt. Record HECS debt went up 7%, indexed from June last year, at the end of June last year. And these young people are getting into the workforce. Yes, it's the best loan you can ever take, but when you mix that and combine that with the cost of living crisis, it is so difficult for these young people. Housing affordability is going to be so much more difficult for them than perhaps you could argue previous generations. And the Shadow Minister referred to childcare, it being a desert in regional areas, and she is so correct. Labor talks a big game about affordability of childcare, but it is availability in regional areas. That is the crisis point. They can't find a childcare placement. And I know we have listened to the Health Minister recently talking about, well, if you can't find a bulk billing doctor, then just jump on the phone and take the next available one. That could be hundreds of kilometres away for somebody who lives in a remote area, or even, dare I say, a rural or regional area. And it's the same with childcare, as the member for Mallee, who knows what I'm talking about, all too well aware. She's all too well aware of what I'm talking about when it comes to childcare availability, not necessarily affordability, but availability. And under Labor, we've seen savage cuts of up to $102 million to university research programs that have meant such a difference. I know in my electorate, where agricultural excellence is promoted and pushed by Charles Sturt University, we can't afford to be cutting research programs. We should be doing more in the space of R&D. The abolition under Labor of the 50% pass rule, which safeguards students from incurring massive student debt. The question is why? Why has this taken place? A start-up loan scheme for courses that were previously free, a student support scheme that delivers no substantive support. I mean, these things are on Labor's watch. Declining school standards with no solution in sight. And there was a very interesting article, both promoted by the ABC and indeed The Guardian, just the other day, in relation to the fact that up to a third of Australian children cannot read properly as teaching methods cause preventable tragedy. And that was the Grattan Institute. But on so many other levels, you talk to teachers and they're overwhelmed by the work that they have to do. They have to be all things to all children these days. And, you know, I take my hat off to our teachers. They work very hard and they put the kids' welfare first and foremost, as they should. But when only 12% of Australian 15-year-olds are able to read at an advanced level, with children from poor families 10 times more likely to have deficient reading ability compared to their richer peers, you have to ask yourself, where is our country headed? Where is our country headed? Because reading is of such critical importance, and it doesn't matter what occupation those kids will be doing in the future. It doesn't matter whether they're the astrophysicist or manual labour. They need to be able to read. They need to be able to write. And under this Labor government, reading and writing standards have sadly slipped. And Labor will, of course, point the finger, as so many of them do when they get their talking points, and they just read them straight from the piece of paper they've been handed. But the fact remains, we need to be looking after our children better. We need to be able to make sure that those educational standards are better. And indeed, you look at the HECS debts, they are only going to increase with the inflationary crisis that we've got under Labor's watch, the cost of living crisis under Labor's watch, the lack of childcare placements under Labor's watch. Fees have increased, out-of-pocket costs have skyrocketed, and no additional places created for families when it comes to childcare. And the Education Minister talks a big game on the National School Reform Agreement, but so far, no national agreement, no school reforms. So What's the Education Minister doing? What's Labor doing? Life is just much more costlier and much more harder under this government.
I thank the honourable member for Riverina. The question is